Hey guys, tonight we're doing one of those slow ones. So go ahead and dim the lights, maybe lower your phone brightness. If you're lying in bed, find that position that feels almost comfortable but not enough to fully commit. Perfect. Tonight we're drifting back to an America that technically existed, but emotionally feels like a different planet. An America kids today would look at and immediately ask, wait, where's the Wi-Fi? And the answer, of course, would be nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. This was an America before constant noise, before alerts, before screens yelling at you for not checking them every 12 seconds. An America where boredom wasn't a medical emergency. It was just called Tuesday. So let's ease into it. Picture a quiet neighborhood. Not a gated one, not a manicured, influencer-approved one. Just a regular street. Modest houses, lawns that were sort of green but mostly questionable. A few kids' bikes tossed onto the grass like they'd been abandoned mid-escape. No one is filming anything. No one is live. No one is branding themselves. The day starts early because that's just what people did, not because they wanted to, because the sun said so. And the sun, back then, had authority. Fathers leave for work wearing the same coat they've owned since Eisenhower was president. Mothers move through kitchens with quiet efficiency, pouring coffee into mugs that advertise local businesses that no longer exist. The radio hums softly in the background, delivering news in a calm, reassuring voice that somehow manages to make even bad events sound manageable. And kids just exist. They eat cereal that is aggressively not healthy, and no one is worried about it. They walk to school, alone, sometimes miles. No GPS tracking, no texts, no check-ins. And somehow, miraculously, society does not collapse. School itself is an experience kids today would find unsettling. Classrooms are quiet. Teachers are not negotiable. If you act up, there are consequences, and none of them involve a carefully worded email. Homework exists, but it ends. It doesn't follow you home through notifications and portals and apps with login issues. And when school lets out, something truly alien happens. Kids go outside. Not for content, not for steps, not for a challenge. They just go outside. They wander. They invent games with rules that make no sense and are never written down. They scrape knees. They get bored. They argue. They disappear for hours, and no adult knows exactly where they are. And this is considered normal. Dinner is at a fixed time, not because of scheduling conflicts, but because that's when dinner is. Families sit together. Sometimes they talk, sometimes they don't. The television might be on later, but it doesn't dominate the house. It doesn't follow you into every room. When it's off, it's truly off. And when night comes, it actually feels like night. The house grows quiet. Phones do not buzz. There is nothing to scroll. People sit with their thoughts, which, frankly, is a concept kids today would find deeply uncomfortable. This America was slower, not smarter, not better in every way, just slower. News arrived once a day, maybe twice if you watched the evening broadcast. You didn't know everything instantly, and weirdly, that didn't destroy your sense of reality. If something happened far away, it stayed far away for a while. Tragedy didn't arrive with push notifications. It arrived folded into a newspaper days later, already softened by time. Privacy still existed, real privacy, the kind you didn't have to toggle on. Your embarrassing moments lived and died locally. There was no permanent record, no algorithm deciding this was your personality now. Mistakes were forgotten, or at least not monetized. And work was work.
When people clocked out, they were done. No emails at midnight, no expectation of availability. Your boss could not reach you, and that was considered reasonable. Weekends felt longer, not because they were, but because they weren't fractured into tiny digital interruptions. Sunday mornings were quiet. Stores were closed. Yes, closed. Imagine explaining that to a modern teenager. People rested, not efficiently, not productively, just rested. Cars were simpler. They broke down more, but when they worked, they worked. Road trips meant maps, paper ones. Wrong turns were part of the experience, not a failure of technology. Gas stations were places you talked to people, real people, some of them weird, some of them too chatty, all of them unavoidable. And boredom, let's talk about boredom. Boredom was everywhere. It stretched across afternoons like a heavy blanket. And instead of being feared, it was endured, sometimes even respected. Boredom gave people time to think, or stare at nothing, or just exist without stimulation. Kids today don't understand that kind of boredom, not because they're incapable, but because the world no longer allows it. Back then, if you wanted entertainment, you had to commit. You read a book, watched a full show, listened to a whole album. You didn't skip after 8 seconds because you weren't feeling it. Attention spans were longer, not because people were superior, but because nothing trained them to be shorter. Even arguments were different. You couldn't fact-check mid-argument. You just believed you were right and stayed that way forever. Friendships formed slowly. They lasted longer. And when they ended quietly. No blocking, no subtweets, just distance. This America wasn't perfect, far from it. It had deep flaws, big ones, structural ones. But it had something kids today rarely experience. Silence. Real silence. The kind that isn't filled with background noise or low-level anxiety. At night, neighborhoods slept, not just physically, mentally. Lights went out. Thoughts slowed down. People were unreachable, and that was okay. Kids today wouldn't understand this America because it required patience, and patience was never optimized. Nothing begged for your attention. Nothing competed for your time. You lived one moment at a time because that's all there was. And as we slowly drift deeper into this lost rhythm, into the routines and rituals of a pre-digital nation, the America that moved at human speed, we'll just keep floating. No rush, no notifications, just a quiet country moving gently through time.
Part 2. The Sound of Ordinary Days. Mornings in this America had a sound. Not a notification, not an alarm with a motivational quote, just noise. Doors closing, coffee brewing, a car engine coughing itself awake. The radio, always the radio, talking to no one in particular, filling kitchens with weather reports and baseball scores from the night before. People didn't curate their mornings. They survived them. Newspapers landed on porches with a dull thump, and that thump meant something had happened somewhere. You didn't know what yet. You'd find out when you were ready, or when the coffee kicked in. Kids today wouldn't understand waiting for information, waiting without refreshing. If you missed the news, you missed it. There was no rewind, no replay, no outrage loop. And somehow, people coped. Telephones existed, of course, but they were polite. They stayed in one place. They didn't vibrate in your pocket like a needy insect. When the phone rang, it was an event. Everyone paused, someone answered, and if no one was home, that was it. No voicemail, no follow-up text. The message simply vanished into the universe. People accepted this with shocking emotional stability. Afternoons stretched on. Workplaces hummed quietly.
Typewriters clicked like mechanical insects, papers shuffled, coffee cups accumulated stains that no one bothered to clean. Office gossip traveled slowly. If someone messed up, the whole building didn't know within 6 minutes. Mistakes had time to breathe. Lunch breaks were actual breaks. People left their desks, they sat outside, they smoked, they talked about nothing important. And when the day ended, it ended. Factories shut down, offices emptied. No one carried work home inside their head. The commute was quiet. Cars rolled down roads without podcasts explaining how to optimize your personality. Some people sang. Some people thought. Some people stared straight ahead, completely unreachable. Evenings were predictable. Predictability wasn't boring, it was comforting. Dinner, dishes, maybe television. And television was an event, not a lifestyle. You watched what was on, not what you wanted, not what an algorithm thought you needed. If you missed your show, you missed it, and you survived. Commercials played, and no one complained. They went to the bathroom, they grabbed snacks, they lived their lives. Kids today wouldn't understand watching commercials without screaming internally. Families gathered in the same room, not staring at separate screens, just sharing the same space, occasionally speaking, occasionally not. And then, slowly, the night settled in. Streetlights flickered on, crickets took over, the world dimmed itself. No glowing rectangles in every window, no blue light bleeding into bedrooms. People read, or listened to the radio, or just lay there thinking thoughts that didn't need to be shared. Privacy wasn't something you protected, it was something you had by default. No one documented their sadness, no one branded their happiness. If you were lonely, you just were. And friendships existed in physical space. You had to show up. If you didn't, you disappeared for a while. People drifted apart without drama. No digital ashes to sift through. This America had time gaps, spaces where nothing happened. Kids today would panic in those gaps. They'd fill them instantly. But back then, gaps were normal. They were where life lived. And as the hours rolled forward, slow, steady, unremarkable, the country moved on without knowing it was being watched, archived, or compared. Just people, doing ordinary things in an America that never imagined it would one day feel this quiet again.
Part 3. Growing Up Without an Audience. Childhood in this America happened mostly unobserved. No highlight reels, no comment sections, no permanent record of that one weird phase everyone pretends didn't happen. Kids today wouldn't understand growing up without witnesses. You failed privately. You embarrassed yourself locally. And then, incredibly, you moved on. There were no likes to chase, no followers to impress. The only approval that mattered came from a small, manageable group of people who already knew your worst qualities. And somehow, that was enough. Teenagers were awkward in real time. They experimented with bad haircuts and worse fashion choices, and the evidence did not resurface a decade later. No one filmed the talent show. No one clipped the argument. Memory was the only archive, and memory is merciful. School dances were just dances, dim lights, loud music, the slow panic of not knowing what to do with your hands. And once it was over, it was over. No replay, no commentary, no strangers weighing in. Dating was slower, painfully slower. You waited by the phone, you wondered, you overthought everything. And if someone didn't call back, there was no way to confirm why, which meant you invented reasons and lived with them. Closure was optional and often unavailable. Kids today would demand screenshots. Back then, you just suffered quietly. Weekends revolved around nothing special. Malls, drive-ins,
basements with mismatched furniture. You didn't announce plans, you just made them. If people showed up, great. If not, you adjusted. There was no pressure to perform fun, no need to prove you were enjoying yourself. Boredom and joy coexisted peacefully. Parents worried, of course, but their worry had limits. They didn't track your location, they didn't monitor your thoughts, they hoped you were okay and trusted that you probably were. This trust was not always deserved, but it existed anyway. Reputation traveled slowly. If you messed up, it stayed within a few zip codes. You could reinvent yourself by moving, physically moving. Kids today wouldn't understand that level of escape. Music mattered differently. You listened to albums front to back. You memorized lyrics without realizing it. Songs were tied to moments, not trends. If you loved something, you loved it quietly. No public declaration required. And when things hurt, really hurt, you dealt with it alone or with a friend. You didn't crowdsource your pain. You didn't quantify it. You just sat with it until it softened. This America didn't offer constant validation, and yet people grew up, imperfect, awkward, resilient. As childhood drifted into adulthood, life didn't speed up, it simply continued. No one was counting views, no one was building a personal brand. You were just a person, living one ordinary day after another. And that, strangely enough, was enough to build a life.
Part 4. Work, Time, and the Art of Being Unreachable. Adulthood in this America arrived quietly. No announcement, no milestone post. One day you were just responsible. You got a job, not a calling, not a passion project, a job. And that job existed in a physical place. You went there, you did things, you left. And when you left, the job stayed behind, sitting patiently in the building like a well-trained dog. Kids today wouldn't understand being unreachable to your employer. Once you clocked out, you vanished. Your boss could not text you, your coworkers could not email you. If something went wrong overnight, it simply waited until morning, and the world did not end. Workdays had edges, clear beginnings, clear endings. People complained, of course, but they complained to each other, in person, quietly. Office politics moved at a human pace. Grudges formed slowly. Reputations took years to build. You weren't evaluated constantly, no metrics tracking your engagement or enthusiasm. You did your work. That was enough. Lunch breaks were sacred. You sat somewhere, you ate something, sometimes you talked, sometimes you stared at the wall. No one optimized lunch. Factories were loud, offices were dull, both were predictable. Predictability wasn't a flaw, it was stability. Paychecks arrived on paper, you held them, you deposited them. Money felt real because it was physical. You knew exactly how much you had because you counted it. Bills arrived in envelopes. You opened them deliberately. There was no auto pay quietly draining your account while you weren't looking. Evenings after work felt earned. They belonged to you. You fixed things. You mowed lawns. You sat on porches and watched nothing happen. Neighbors talked. Not deeply, not meaningfully, just enough to feel connected. Time moved slower because nothing was demanding it from you. Weekdays blended together gently. Weekends felt like a reward. Saturday mornings were for errands. Sunday afternoons were for rest. Rest without guilt. No side hustles, no pressure to monetize your free time. Hobbies were allowed to be useless. People built things badly.
They painted, they played instruments poorly, and no one knew unless they were physically present. Failure was private, which made it survivable. Vacations were truly vacations. You left town, you told a few people, and then you disappeared. Postcards arrived late, and that was fine. Emergencies were rare. Everything else could wait. Kids today wouldn't understand waiting, but waiting was built into life, and because of that, people breathed differently. They didn't feel watched. They didn't feel rushed. They lived inside time instead of chasing it. And as adulthood settled in, steady, quiet, unremarkable, life didn't feel smaller. It felt manageable. Just one day, then another.
Part 5. Evenings, Weekends, and the Lost Skill of Doing Nothing. As the sun went down in this America, things slowed in a way that feels almost fictional now. Not dramatically, not intentionally. They just wound down. Shops closed. Not staggered, not open late for your convenience. Closed. Windows darkened. Signs clicked off. Streets emptied. Kids today wouldn't understand a town that simply goes to sleep. Evenings belonged to households, not to feeds, not to updates. Dinner happened, then dishes, then a long stretch of time with no clear purpose. People watched television, yes, but television didn't chase you, it waited. You sat through whatever was on. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it absolutely wasn't. And when it ended, there was nothing else automatically lined up. No autoplay, no recommended for you. Silence returned. Some people read, some listened to music, some just sat there, mildly uncomfortable with their own thoughts until they weren't anymore. This America allowed people to be alone without calling it a crisis. Weekends arrived slowly. You felt them coming. Friday evenings had weight, not excitement, relief. Saturday mornings were quiet. Hardware stores, grocery runs, yard work. Tasks that took time and didn't pretend otherwise. Afternoons stretched endlessly. Kids roamed, adults tinkered. Time passed without asking permission. There was no obligation to be productive, no invisible audience measuring how well you rested. Sunday was different, not louder, quieter. Stores closed again, phones rang less, the world dimmed. People napped without guilt. They sat on couches and let the day drift past them. Kids today wouldn't understand a full day with nowhere to go and nothing to check. Boredom returned, deep, heavy boredom, the kind that forces creativity or sleep. People wrote letters, real ones. They waited weeks for replies and survived the wait. Life didn't offer instant reassurance. You had to assume things were okay. And most of the time they were. Even conflicts moved slower. Arguments cooled because there was no constant reopening. You could step away from someone and actually be away. No reminders, no resurfacing memories. When the weekend ended, it ended gently. No anxiety countdown, no Sunday night spiral. Monday arrived whether you were ready or not, and that was just life. This America didn't promise happiness, it didn't optimize comfort, but it gave people something rare now. Space. Space to think. Space to feel bored. Space to be imperfect without witnesses. And as days stacked quietly into years, no one realized what they had. They were too busy living inside it.
Part 6. The America that didn't know it was ending. This America didn't vanish overnight.
There was no announcement, no final episode. It faded, quietly, politely, one convenience at a time. A new device here, a faster way there. Each change felt small, helpful even. No one woke up and said, "Today we trade silence for noise." It just happened. At first it was exciting. Information moved faster. Life felt lighter. Waiting became optional. Distance shrank. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the gaps disappeared. The empty moments filled up. The quiet spaces closed in. People became reachable, then expected to be reachable. Evenings gained interruptions. Weekends gained obligations. Privacy didn't vanish, it thinned. It became something you had to protect instead of something you naturally had. Kids today were born into the aftermath. They never knew the pause between moments, the stillness between thoughts. They don't miss it because they never had it. And that's not an accusation, just an observation. The old America had flaws, serious ones, but it had rhythm, a human pace. Days ended, mistakes faded, silence existed. You weren't constantly aware of the world's weight. You carried only what was near you, and somehow that was enough. This America didn't document itself. It didn't archive its feelings. It just lived and moved on. People loved quietly, grieved privately, forgot things that needed forgetting. There were no receipts for every moment, no evidence trail of being human. And maybe that's why it feels so distant now. Not because it was better, but because it was softer. Time moved through people instead of around them. Life happened once, and then it passed. No replay, no rewind, just memory. And as we sit here now, surrounded by light and sound and endless connection, this older America rests somewhere behind us, unrecorded, unoptimized, a country that never knew it would become a bedtime story. So if your eyes are heavy now, that's fine. Let the quiet of another era settle in. No alerts, no updates, just a slow country finally asleep.